All right, about time to get started this morning. Good to see everybody here this morning. Good to be enjoying some beautiful, close to fall mornings here lately. Last week, we studied out of Mark 5, although Matthew and Luke both also gave us that account of the demoniac, we call him the demoniac, the man who was demon-possessed in Gadara and Gergesa. And we studied him, and we didn't make it through that whole passage, but we made it almost all the way through and covered a lot of the tedious stuff. And if you were here last Sunday morning for Bible class and not for Sunday night, I finished covering that Sunday night, that account. So we did cover that all the way Sunday night. I just made it into the sermon for Sunday night. But today we're going to move on to a different lesson. As you can see, we've taken down the conversations with Jesus, and now we have a miracle of Jesus. So we've seen several miracles already, but the focus today is on the miracle that Jesus performed here in Jerusalem, the healing of the invalid man. And there's only one account of that, and that is in John chapter 5. So if you open with me to John 5, we'll be studying this invalid man, or as my translation here says, impotent man. We find he couldn't walk. He had a difficulty with that. But we're just going to start right off here. Verse 1 tells us about Jesus and why he's in Jerusalem. So here in verse 1, John chapter 5 and verse 1, John wrote, "After this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem." So we've noticed that several times. Sometimes these chapters in the gospel account start off that way, just give us a bit of information, and but it's some good information here that it gives us. Tells us that there was a feast. We know that when we read God's word, we're not just reading it's not a textbook. We're reading about real people who lived in a real time in history and dealt with real things. That when we read things like this, we can kind of put our minds, use our imaginations. Even imagination, sometimes we think of that as children imagining something that's not really there for fun. And children's imaginations work better than ours. But as adults, we need to use our imaginations, not to make things up, necessarily make believe, but imagine what we're reading here. Imagine when we read scriptures, imagine ourselves there. Imagine what these people felt. And when was the New Testament written? All these things took place in the first century. So I'm talking about about 2,000 years ago. So when we read these things, we can imagine ourselves look at these things through first century glasses, we say sometimes. And that's how we can look at these things and imagine how these we're not reading about Christians here, but people who are soon to be Christians after Jesus dies and is resurrected and the church is established. But we can look at things through their eyes. So here we read some detail here that gives us a good picture of what's going on, where they are, and why they're there. There was a feast of the Jews. Now what feast? Well, I don't know. John doesn't tell us what feast was going on here. They had many feasts. They had the Passover feast, the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles, and all these different feasts. There were feasts that were commanded, like the Passover feast. That was a commanded feast. All the Jews were supposed to go to Jerusalem to observe that feast. Or at least, I believe all of them were to go for Passover. There were some feasts that only the males were supposed to go to Jerusalem for. We discussed that some back in Luke chapter 2, I believe, where we read about Jesus and his being left at the temple by his parents. They were there for a feast, and it appears everybody, the whole family and the whole town went down to Jerusalem for this feast. Well, it seems that's what's going on here. There's a feast. We don't know what feast it is, but we know that Jesus attended certainly all the mandatory feasts for men. He was a faithful Jew. When we read the Pharisees attacking him and accusing him, we're about to read here in a moment, of not keeping the law or not keeping these laws, they're not, whether they knew it or not, they're not talking about Moses' law. He kept Moses' law absolutely perfect. Everything that God commanded, Jesus did. Jesus was not against the law. Jesus was not against religion. His religion was the law of Moses, Judaism. But the Pharisees had added laws, their own commandments, and that's what Jesus did not care to keep, and what he went against the grain on, not keeping the Mosaic law. So we don't know what the thesis was, but Jesus went, and he had to go to Jerusalem, along with whoever else is following with him. So that's verse 1. Verse 2, now there's at Jerusalem by the sheep, my King James Version says sheep market. A lot of translations say the sheep gate. There's at Jerusalem by the sheep gate, we'll say, a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethsaida, having 5 porches. So read some details about where they are in Jerusalem. They're by the sheep gate. They're here at the sheep gate. Now, we don't know. We read about these things. You can go to Jerusalem today and see a lot of these pools still there. A lot of them are, there's more than one pool in Jerusalem. We'll see that here on the screen in a moment. But we can see where a lot of these things were. We don't know exactly what it looked like in the first century, but our imaginations can help us there, and there's been things developed where we can kind of see maybe what it, close to what it looked like. And here is a depiction of where they were. So this is Jerusalem. There's the outer wall here in Jerusalem. This is the northeast side here. And there's the Temple Mount, where the temple was. They would go and sacrifice, where the main worship was performed here at the temple. And here's about where they would have been, the pool of Bethsaida. And there was a pool there. It was a pool. It was a body of water that came from a spring. Now there were many springs throughout the city of Jerusalem, and many of these springs there were siphoned. There's still many there in operation. Not necessarily needing to be used, but they're there to look at and historically marking things. They would siphon often water from somewhere else into another spot, and where they could fill it, make a pool there, and have a source of water. Because, well, in the first century and before that, that's how you got water. You went down to these pools and you dipped water out. Now this pool, we're going to find out there's something significant about it. Something very interesting about it, and even of a little bit of controversy. When I say a little bit, I mean a little bit, not major. But we'll read that here in verse 3 and 4. There were many pools throughout Jerusalem similar to this, although this one sticks out. There's a good picture of the city of Jerusalem. It shows that pool there. This is a little bit lopsided. This is north, and then this is east, and this is west, and this is south. There's the Valley of Hinnom down there in the south that Jesus would refer to for. That's a picture of what hell's like. They would burn all their garbage there and different things. So, but the pool of Bethsaida there, just north of the northeast of the where the temple is, right here, right? It has a spring there feeding it. I wanted to mention about these springs. It's interesting, to me at least, these pools that were in Jerusalem. You have down here what they call the pool of Siloam, and that pool is certainly still there. And you can still go down to it, and people go down there and actually get in that pool. But the pool of Siloam, what happened there, in 2 Kings chapter 20, or is it 20? Yeah, chapter 20, we read about Hezekiah, the king of Jerusalem, after Jerusalem was sieged and God delivered them. Hezekiah decided he needed to bring a good source of water into Jerusalem, so that if armies surround him, they can have a source of water. They can have something they can always draw from. But he had to get the water from outside the city. So what he did was he came outside the walls, and they dug a well out in this area right here. And then they sealed the well off out there and dug a tunnel. And 2 Kings 20 describes all of this. And they sealed it off, and they brought it right here and dug out a place and built a place that would make a pool. And you have this pool of Siloam. That's one of the major pools that is still in Jerusalem. So these pools were important. I'm say all that not completely separate from our study this morning, to say these pools were very important to the Jews. These bodies of water. And this one is important for another reason. We'll find out. Verse 3. Read with me. And these lay a great multitude. So we heard about this pool here at Bethsaida. We saw about where it is in the major city of Jerusalem. And here's some things about it. And these lay a great multitude of impotent folk. And these, the porches, the surrounding the pool, of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. Moving of the water. And that's interesting. So before we get into the next verse, imagine with me, as we've already mentioned, these people who are around this pool. John gives a good description of the kind of people who are around this pool waiting. And we're going to see further, it seems like it's a pretty good crowd of people. I don't think there's a lot of room in this place. These people seem to be almost maybe crowding this pool. But they're impotent folk. That's what's said about this man who can't walk. He's impotent. Blind, halt, lame. That has something to do with not being able to get around. Withered. That carries that in. They're paralyzed. They're withered. They can't move. Maybe kind of like this, drawn up and can't get around. Withered, waiting for the moving of the water. Blind, withered, halt, impotent. These are people. Many of them probably had to be brought to this pool. How does a paralyzed person, unless he just lives there all the time, somebody had to bring him there. Somebody, and notice with this impotent man, he can't walk. We don't read anything about it, but it seems to be implied someone must have had to bring him to this spot to wait on this moving of the water. But these people, notice these problems they had. These are not, they didn't have a cold or, back pain, something like that you can live with. I know back pain sometimes you get to where you can't live with it. But they didn't have, these people didn't have a minor issue. These things, these are things, I can't help but notice that even today, people cannot, that clock stopped working. I was thinking, how are we going backwards? Anyway, so that's all right. We got plenty of time. So these people,
they have chronic.
Yeah, they had chronic problems that had them down. That even today, think about someone who's blind, someone who can't walk, someone who's withered like that. What can the doctor do for them? Nothing, usually. Still, 2,000 years later, all the medical knowledge we have and the abilities we have, these issues that we're reading about here, if this was today and these people had the same problem, they really couldn't go to the doctor. These are hopeless people, is what we're pointing out. But they have no hope. So no cure. There's no cure for this today. There's just nothing we can do about it. There's man can only do so much. We can help things, and doctors certainly help things, but there's no cure for these things. These people are hopeless, and which also we see a contrast in their hopelessness and the hope that Jesus offers. And that's the picture he gives, is it not? When he heals someone, he's not healing people in the same sense that he was then, coming laying hands on someone like this, and all of a sudden they're able to get up and walk. But he's still certainly healing people spiritually. So we see a picture often here of us spiritually. You know, we have absolutely no hope, spiritually speaking, without Jesus. These people had absolutely no hope whatsoever, spiritually speaking, without Jesus. I don't know if Jesus healed other ones there. We don't read about that. We just read about this one man. We know he healed way more people than what we read about. In fact, John tells us that, actually. But this is a sad picture here, these people around this pool. So why are they here around this pool? They're waiting for the moving of the water. What does that mean? Well, verse 4 is going to tell us about that. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water, moved the water somehow. Whosoever then first after the troubling, after that water started moving, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. Now, this is where this verse here is very interesting for multiple reasons. It's interesting no matter how you look at it. And I believe it's necessary, certainly, for us to read it and know what it says, no matter how you look at it, because this is telling us why these people are here. The moving of the water, what this moving of the water was supposed to be. But I want to just look at, there are several opinions about this verse, and I say opinions because that's what they are. It's not, there's no, these are opinions that don't amount to a lot. It doesn't really matter. We know this verse is here, and what it tells us allows us to imagine and understand what's going on here. So, and in relation to these hopeless people, they're finding hope at this pool, or at least they think they are. But here's some opinions about this verse. First one is that this verse does not belong here. I'm not of that opinion at all. But first one, I'll explain that. So the first one is that it doesn't belong here. That it's made its way into the text, and the original writings didn't have this verse in them. Now, the reason that's said sometimes is because many of the oldest manuscripts, which are the original text, we don't have any, to be clear, any original, like the scrolls that the apostles wrote upon, but the oldest ones, tracing back, the oldest copies we have, basically, is what I'm referring to there with the original text, the oldest text. Well, many of them don't include this verse. Many of the texts have these words, this description on the side, kind of like a commentary, where scribes, when they translated it, it seems just put this information there to understand what was going on in the day. So this idea is that this is not necessarily what's actually happening, but a description of how the Jews viewed this pool. Now, I also want to point out it doesn't matter one way or the other, really, how you view it. It's there. But I wanted to bring that out because that is an argument for this verse not necessarily being necessary for the text or having been intended to be included in the Bible, actually being inspired. But I want to also point out some of the other manuscripts do include this verse. So there are older manuscripts that have this verse in it. So it's not necessarily that we can say that it's not supposed to be in the Bible. But that argument, I would never go for that argument with really any scriptures. And I'll tell you why. This same argument is used when it comes to Mark 16 and verses 9 through 20. Many people outside the church say that Mark 16 and verses 9 through 20, that section, should not be included in our New Testaments because some of the oldest manuscripts, some of the oldest copies of Scripture on the old scrolls don't include it. Well, some of those old manuscripts, copies, do have a section where it's supposed to be. But why do you think someone would want to get rid of Mark 16 verses 9 through 20? Why do you think someone would want to get rid of that section?
Baptism.
Exactly. Verse 16. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. He who does not believe shall be damned. So that there's a reason behind that. Now I say that to make the contrast with this verse. It doesn't matter nearly as much. There's nothing here that's going to have any effect on our souls. There is nothing here about salvation or even related to salvation. It's just information. And it's good information, regardless of whether it's literal or not is really the question. And the second opinion here is that, and also if you read if you have a copy of the ASV, I don't know how old a copy you have to have for it to be this way. I don't have a physical copy of the ASV, the American Standard Version. I have one on my computer. And on my computer, if you notice in the King James Bible, there's a lot of italicized words. Those are words that were placed, added by the translators into the text to help us understand. And much of it is very necessary, certainly, to help us understand what we're reading. Sometimes you can't really even read it without these italicized words. Well, the ASV I have, American Standard Version, has this verse in italics, saying that it was just added to help us understand. It's not part of the original text. Some ASV Bibles don't have this verse at all. It's just completely omitted. So there is that to consider. The second opinion is that John, he did write this by inspiration. But he's not meaning this to tell us what was actually happening. Rather, the idea the Jews had that this angel came down and stirred the water, and that the angel didn't actually do this. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, we read further, Jesus never mentions this when he talks to this invalid man. The invalid man mentions this idea about the angel coming and stirring the water. And when Jesus talks to him, he doesn't mention it. I don't know if that's ample evidence enough to say this definitely was not, that this angel did not literally come down and do this, but that's what's said. Also, there could be natural reasons why this pool would have bubbled on a regular basis. It did.
Was that those pools, were they cisterns? To store water?
Yeah, basically cisterns. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering. I know that most of those cities didn't have plumbing like the Roman cities did.
Yeah.
They didn't have aqueducts.
Yeah.
Things carrying water down, but they had fountains. That would be troubling the water whenever they filled them up.
Yeah, and that could be, or just something natural. They might have bubbled more naturally on their own, or that. But it could be, yeah, that's what.
Into it,
yeah,
like that.
Yeah, it could be something like that. Yeah, that's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. It could be something like that. That's the other idea. It could be something like that. But the Jews had this is maybe a myth, so to speak, that they had about this. Or the third opinion, the last one I'll mention, is that the angel did come down and trouble this water miraculously. Whether or not it's true that the water, whether or not this angel actually came down, I don't know. Because what we read here is that an angel went down at a certain season into the pool. Now, why would that be a thing that would happen then? I don't know. It doesn't seem to fit.
Think about Solomon built the temple, and he was the wisest man in the world.
Yeah.
He probably had sense enough to come up with some kind of
system. And that definitely could have been the case.
Some kind of way to move water.
Yeah, he could have done. Yeah, that definitely could be the case. Or if the angel just came down and did this, I have no issue there. Maybe this angel actually came and did this. Either way, it has nothing to do with salvation. Just gives us information here. And these people are seeking hope. We'll say all that to now look at what Jesus did. So regardless, this man could not get in this water and be healed. Also, it seems maybe this man, if he could get in the water and be healed, why didn't someone put him in the water, or Jesus could have put him in the water? I don't know. But either way, Jesus doesn't worry much about this angel troubling the water. He does something for this man. He has the answer for this man. So read verse 5 with me. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. So here's the man that Jesus specifically talks to. Why does he go to this man specifically? I don't know. But this is the man he hones in on here. Because there's other sick people there. But he had an infirmity 38 years. That's a long time. We don't know when, maybe this man's 38 years old and he had it from birth. That could certainly be the case. Maybe he's in his 80s and he's had it. Something happened in his life that caused this. He had an accident of some sort. Either way, this man has been sick for a long time. He suffered for a very long time, 38 years. Maybe some of you have a something you suffered with physically for decades. That's a long time to suffer with something, and many people do suffer their whole lives with problems. So he's had this infirmity. It seems people probably understood that this man had this infirmity. If they knew who he was, they would have known that this man was suffering and could not walk. We're going to see that. That's certainly what the case is he can't walk. He's in desperate need for help, just like everyone else here at this pool. So, verse 6, when Jesus saw him lie, he's lying there, he can't walk, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? Or would you like to be made whole? Wilt thou be made whole? He asked him a question. And there again, it's interesting, Jesus doesn't even mention the troubling of the water, although this man does. He just asked him, Wilt thou be made whole? Gets him to thinking. And here's the man's response in verse 7. The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. So it's a lot of people have gathered around here. Seems to be a widespread idea that when this water bubbles and troubles, you can go down into this water and be healed. I don't know how many are around it. I know this man cannot walk, so he can't. But it seems maybe he's trying to get to the pool. I don't know. Is he scooting, crawling, rolling toward it? I don't know. But whatever it is, he's fighting his own. He has his own inabilities. He can't walk. He's also fighting a crowd, other people going in front of him to be healed by this water, and he can't seem to get there. Again, he's hopeless. He doesn't seem to be able to get what he thinks, at the very least, what he thinks that he needs from this pool. He's fighting a crowd. But Jesus comes along, and he has an answer for him. He doesn't have to fight the crowd anymore. Notice also this man has not made any mention of who Jesus is. And we're going to see here in the end that it doesn't seem that this man really knows who Jesus is until later on. So, although he's very popular, maybe he had an idea, but he doesn't know who he's talking to at this moment at the very least, it seems. Verse 8, so here's Jesus. So he can't get down into the water. And here's Jesus' response to him. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. So, and walk. Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. Now, we just mentioned this man has not said anything about Jesus. He's not called him Lord. He's not referred to him in any way that gives us any indication that he has any appreciation for who Jesus is, the way he communicates with him. And at the end, he tells the Pharisees, the religious leaders, that he doesn't know who it was that healed him. So he doesn't seem to know who it is. I point that out to say this man didn't have any faith in Jesus. He's just laying here, and Jesus decides to come to him for whatever reason we don't know specifically. He comes to him, and this man doesn't have any faith. He doesn't necessarily believe in Jesus or believe Jesus can do this. That's because faith is not always. Now there were times when Jesus certainly tested people's faith. The apostles in the ship, whenever he calms the sea, he asked, "Why are you so little faith?" And he certainly we talked about the centurion when his when his daughter, not his daughter, that's another one. The centurion, when we talked about when his servant was healed, this centurion had faith in Jesus, strong faith, and Jesus commends him for it. But Jesus didn't necessarily only heal people who had great faith in him. Well, what do we hear sometimes about people who call themselves faith healers? You may think of that on a large scale, where it's a faith healer on TV that says, "I'm going to lay my hand on your forehead and heal you." Or on a smaller scale, maybe just someone who's charismatic who wants to pray with you and say, "You have enough faith, Jesus will heal you." Well, we certainly are commanded to have faith in Jesus. But when Jesus healed someone, he didn't always demand faith for them to be healed because he had a greater purpose in healing people. His purpose in healing people was a spiritual purpose. It was to show us spiritual things in the long run. And that's what he did. He did that very effectively. That's what he's doing here. So this man doesn't have any faith in Jesus that we read about. Not yet, anyways. And we're going to read here also, Jesus is more concerned about his spiritual well-being than his physical well-being. He doesn't leave someone with just a physical ailment resolved. He leaves them with information to help them spiritually. He does that with this man. So he tells him, rise up, take up thy bed and walk. He can't walk at all. He is stuck here. Someone probably has to bring him here to this porch and wait on this water to trouble. So read verse 9, the effects, what happened, the result. And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. Now we're going to separate this verse, talk about the first part and the second part. He immediately was made whole. That gives us a good picture of how things looked often or every time when Jesus healed someone. It was immediate. This man's been lame. He can't get up and walk for 38 years. He's laying here. Now Jesus comes along.
A lot of people don't think about this man's legs, his muscles and everything.
Exactly. They're gone. He can't, they're gone. He's shriveled up. You think about someone who's just
immediately Jesus gave it to him and he had strength.
Exactly. My mom right now, she's recovering from her broken legs, and she's recovering well. But what's happened was she's got arm strength now with her legs. When that one leg heals, it already looks smaller. The muscle's gone in it. She'll have to build that strength back up. He's been like this forever. He had absolutely, like Kent said, no strength in his legs. And when Jesus tells him to get up, all of a sudden, immediately, it's all made whole. That's how Jesus makes someone whole. He doesn't need a certain amount of time. More prescribed than medicine or surgeries performed on us. What happens? Well, take these precautions. 6 months to a year, you'll be better. Hopefully, you gotta have therapy. You better go to therapy, or it won't heal right. And do what the therapist says, or it won't heal right, and all these different things. When Jesus healed someone, it wasn't like a surgery. It was an immediate, miraculous healing, and there was no doubt anybody else around what it was. And that's the way Jesus worked. So he was immediately healed here. Also, it was on the Sabbath. So Jesus uses this as a teaching moment. There's a reason John tells us that this is on the Sabbath day. Jesus has another purpose here. He's going to use later on, but it's on the Sabbath. So on the Sabbath day, what was the laws? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. So verse 10. John writes, the Jews, therefore, these are the Jewish, when we read the Jews coming against Jesus, we're talking about the Pharisees and the different Jewish leaders who hated Jesus. They want to be rid of Jesus. So it's a negative light. Not the Jews as in all the Jewish population. Many of them followed him. But the Jews, therefore, said unto him that was cured, that's that man he cured, it is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. So picture this. Imagine this with me. The Jews, these leaders, I don't know how far he walked before he saw these religious leaders. He's close. He's right here. You saw him in that picture right here, just north of the temple. Well, there's going to be a lot of Jews that hate Jesus around the temple for sure. The Pharisees are going to hang out there and be in charge of things there. They have their own spot there, so where they meet. So these Jews, they see this man. I would imagine. Again, we're imagining, but I'd imagine have seen this man walking out of this place where all the sick people are. So, do they know this man beforehand? I don't know if they know him beforehand. But the indication seems, especially the next thing said, is that they knew he couldn't walk, and now all of a sudden he's walking. And what are they worried about? They're worried about whether he's keeping their laws or not. Their laws, I emphasize their laws because Jesus wouldn't have encouraged this man to break. In fact, he would have forbidden this man from breaking the Moses law, which was from God concerning the Sabbath. He never would have told this man to take up thy bed and walk if that was against Moses' law. No, this was part of the Pharisees' law. So they had added about 30 laws or details, you might say, concerning what you can and can't do on the Sabbath day. They had very much complicated Moses' law and stretched it a lot, added a lot to it. Moses' law, well, we see that in the Ten Commandments and other places. We see about Moses' law concerning the Sabbath. What he was forbidding was on the Sabbath day, on the last day of the week, was any work that included gain, any work for profit. You couldn't go out and, well, to put it in our minds, how we wouldn't be able to go do a job and now that law is not for us today. We wouldn't be able to go do a job and make money on this job. It didn't forbid someone from doing what was necessary to survive. Didn't forbid someone from pulling an ox out of their ditch. In fact, the Pharisees would have done that. Jesus makes clear in another place, if they needed to on the Sabbath, they condemned someone else for doing it. Hence him calling them hypocrites. But this is a law they had. Well, there was nothing sinful about this man getting up and taking his bed. Something else you'll notice here, they don't care about this man the least bit. We see that often. This man's been healed of an infirmity. He's been crippled for decades. All of a sudden he's healed. And the Pharisees don't seem to even acknowledge what's actually happened, but just trying to control things. So, it says, take up thy bed and walk. So, the Jews therefore said it's not lawful on the Sabbath day, although that was their law, not God's. Verse 11, he answered them, he that made me, so this is the man answers them, and says, he that made me whole, he doesn't know who it is. The same said unto me, take up thy bed and walk. He doesn't know who it is, but he knows that this man has authority, doesn't he, from God, because he's not been able to walk for decades, and all of a sudden, his legs are made whole. That's the thing there. Kent was pointing out how weak his legs were. How did he know how to walk? Let's say, even if he'd been crippled for decades, or from birth, it's been so long since he's walked, like he said about therapy. Even after being down for a long time, you need therapy to help you get back right, get back walking. This man just gets up and starts walking. So Jesus, also part of the miracle, he's got the ability to walk now, the mental coordination and everything. So he's walking, and he doesn't know who it was, but he knows he had authority, and he tells these Pharisees that about this man. So then, in verse 12, then asked they him, what man is that which said unto thee, take up thy bed and walk? So they want to know who this is, who told him to do that, because in their minds, this man has just told you to do something that's not lawful. And of course, this is going to be a way to attack Jesus. And once healed, and he that was healed wist not. He didn't know who it was. For Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in that place. So he didn't know who it was. Jesus evidently didn't introduce himself. He didn't say, I'm Jesus, the Son of God, and now I'm going to heal you. He just did it. But this man understood there was something about him, that he had some kind of authority because he healed him. No, he just healed him, and he withdrew himself from everyone else and went away. We don't know exactly why he did that. We know Jesus had a reason for everything he did. But he drew himself away. So this man, again, that's interesting. You imagine this man, he's being attacked by the Pharisees now, these religious leaders. And really, he's kind of innocent here. He doesn't even know. Jesus didn't ask if he could heal him. Well, he did say, without being made whole. Maybe that was in a sense asking if he could heal him, but he just did it. It just seems to come out of nowhere. Now he's made whole. He's walking, and people are questioning about it. He's saying, I don't even really know what happened here, who it was, but I know that I can walk again. But he does seem to have developed some faith in Jesus because of what he says to Jesus. So Jesus didn't forget about it. He healed him. Like we said, Jesus is mostly concerned about our spiritual state, is he not? He wants to know that we're okay spiritually. And that's what he wanted to know about this man. So he wanted to make that clear to him. So Jesus sees him again. He doesn't forget about him. I don't believe that he just happened upon him here. I believe Jesus wanted to see this man. So in verse 14, afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come unto thee. That's interesting. Jesus tells him that. So he's physically made whole, but he must repent of sin and be whatever sin he had. I don't know. But he tells him to sin no more. So he's telling him to repent in a sense, or he is telling him to repent. To be spiritually whole, he had to repent. Apparently there was sin involved here. Whether that sin had anything to do with his being crippled, I have no idea. Maybe he did something. Maybe he was a fighter back in the day and something happened to him in that, or something like that. We don't know. But Jesus tells him to go and sin no more. And that's a powerful thing Jesus says there. And who else did he tell that? Someone he loved, and he didn't heal her, but he certainly took care of her. He told another person to go and sin no more. That woman in John, the stones, a woman in John 8, the first of John 8, everyone's gathered around her to stone her. And these people are hypocrites, by the way. They're guilty of very possibly the same thing she was. And he says he is without sin. Cast the first stone, and then they all walk away because they're not without sin. Most likely not without the sin that she committed. And then he asked her, where are thine accusers? And she says, I have none. They were all gone. He said, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. He delivered her. He said, you go and sin no more. Jesus, he holds us to that. Grace is the core of why we can be saved. None of us deserve salvation. But upon us obeying the gospel and having that blood of Christ wash our sins away, still today we're told the same thing. Go and sin no more. We're not allowed to just carry on in our sin throughout our lives. That's not Christianity. That's not what Jesus taught. And that's what he makes clear to this person. Lest the worst thing come unto thee. I wonder what the worst thing could have been to come unto him. Is he talking about something physical here? Or is he talking about maybe spiritual death because of sin? I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's referring to there. But he does say, lest the worst thing come unto thee. And he says that in connection to sin. Telling him to go and sin no more. In the last verse, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus, which he made him whole. So conclude that with saying the same Jesus that made him whole, both physically and spiritually, is the one that makes us whole spiritually today. If we're Christians, as Christians, it's the same Jesus that we're reading about here. We learn about him throughout these accounts with different people. Appreciate y'all's attention.